This week in Grace's Girls Club, we're meeting someone from an organization we've spent a lot of time at, NASA, but someone in a field we haven't exactly dove into before. I want you to meet Penny. Penny, welcome to Grace's Girls Club. Please introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about what you do at NASA.
Thank you very much for having me. My name is Penny Pettigrew, and I work at NASA's Marshall Space Flight Center here in Huntsville, Alabama. And I am an International Space Station Payloads Communications Manager, which I know is a mouthful. In short, you can call me a Paycomm. I'm Paycomm Penny. And my job is to support the astronauts who are living and working on the International Space Station. Specifically, I get to talk to the astronauts who are on the space stations and help them with their science experiments. So I always tell people it's like space camp, but the real thing.
That is so cool. So you probably just came off of a very busy several months with the astronauts just coming back to Earth after leaving the ISS.
Very much so. We really enjoyed working with Butch and Sunny. They had both been there before, so we knew them well. So it was an easy transition, and we were actually thrilled to get to work with them a little bit longer than planned.
Wow, that is so awesome. What an incredible career. So walk me through your day to day, right? You walk into the office, you've got all these things to do. Kind of walk me through the day to day of what you go through.
Well, it depends on which day it is, to be honest, because no 2 days are the same, which is what makes my job exciting. We don't get stuck in a rut at all. I'll walk you through a day when I'm on console, supporting the space station. The space station is a 24/7 operation, so we have people supporting the astronauts round the clock all day long. So that's what's a little bit different about my job. It's not just 8 to 5. Some days it's 1 a.m. to 9 a.m. Other days it's 5 a.m. to 1 p.m. So we have to be really flexible with our time. But when we are on console supporting the astronauts, we walk into a very secure room at NASA, and we are in that room with the same group of people for an 8-hour shift. And we have live video into the space station so we can watch our astronauts as they perform their daily routines and kind of be their extra eyes and extra ears, just helping them out, looking for places where they get maybe a little stuck, don't know what's going on. We can jump in and help them. It's almost like watching a whole wall of NASA TVs, but we're not just watching TV. We're watching for safety reasons, and we're watching to make sure they don't lose things because in space, things float away. So we are kind of their extra eyes and ears while they're working through their daily routine.
That is so cool. So what might some of the issues that they encounter be where you have to get involved, or some of the questions they might have for you?
Well, surprisingly enough, a majority of the questions we get are when they can't find something. Everything that they do on board the space station has a written procedure that they can follow step by step as they're working through the activity. And that procedure includes a list of tools or anything they're going to need during this activity. But like I said, in space, things float and things don't always stay where they're put down. So about half the calls we get are when they can't find something. It's not where we expected it to be. And usually that's because it floated off somewhere else. So we try to help them track those things down. The other thing is, even though we have some very intelligent scientists here on the ground, a lot of times what they're doing in space, they're doing for the very first time ever.
Hmm.
So we can anticipate what's going to happen, but we don't really know how things are going to react in space until they're done the first time. So we can think we know what's going to happen and it can be totally different. So we have to stay very flexible and we have to adjust on the fly. So that's why our education is very important, that we have a strong background in science so that when things don't go as expected, we can course correct and help them complete the activity as best possible.
Absolutely, absolutely vital, it sounds like. And going back to losing their items, my first thought was they're probably the only people, I was going to say on the planet, but in the galaxy, that can say, oh my gosh, it just sprouted legs and walked away.
And
So
be totally honest.
exactly, exactly. So going back, you touched on it a little bit, the science of the letters in STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. Which letter or multiples of letters would you say you use the most?
Well, to be honest, in my job, I use all four. It depends on, like I said, every day is different. So one day we might be working more on science experiments. So my science background is very important. But a lot of what's done on the space station is building new technologies, trying to expand the technologies we have here on Earth. So technology is definitely involved. Engineering comes into play when things don't work exactly as expected. And sometimes, especially astronaut Don Pettit, who's up there right now, he's kind of like the garage mechanic, so he likes when things don't work to get in there and try to engineer them to get them to work. So he's our go-to guy to fix things. And math, everything we do on board the space station deals with math, even if it's just knowing what time it is on the space station, because they don't follow the same time we have here in Huntsville. They work on Greenwich Mean Time, which is about the time in London. So they are always 5 or 6 hours ahead of us, depending on what time of the year it is, whether we're in daylight savings time or not. So even just knowing what time it is on board the space station compared to what time it is here in Huntsville requires math.
Absolutely. Did you know we forecast in Z time, in Greenwich time as well? And that's how, because everyone in the world uses the same models and the same simulations. And so we forecast with Z time and then we convert it here as well. So pretty cool. Walk me through educationally how you got to where you are today.
So I grew up wanting to be an astronaut. So I was always interested in the space program from, as long as I can remember. So everything I did with the goal of I want to be an astronaut. Um, so I have a bachelor's in science in chemistry from the Colorado School of Mines in Golden, Colorado. And then I came here to Huntsville for graduate school. So I have a master's of science in microgravity material science from the University of Alabama here in Huntsville. The reason I came to UAH for grad school is because I wanted to be an astronaut as a kid. My mom sent me to space camp. I wanted to go to space camp. I'm not from around this area originally, so it was quite an adventure just to get to space camp. I'm from Southern California originally. But coming to space camp and that experience changed my life in many ways. First, it taught me that NASA was in Alabama. I didn't know that. Everybody knows Houston and the Johnson Space Center because Houston, we have a problem. Everybody knows the Kennedy Space Center because that's where everything launches from in Florida. Not many people outside this area know that NASA is also in Alabama. So that opened my eyes just learning that. And then while I was here attending space camp, I learned that there's a university in town that has strong ties to the Marshall Space Flight Center. So when I was looking for graduate schools, that's what led me to apply to UAH. And I ended up coming here, and then I've been here ever since.
Wow, that is so cool. And what a great story. And we always hope that's what Space Camp does is it inspires the next generation and gets the word out about Huntsville, but you're living breathing proof that that's true.
Exactly. And the other thing Space Camp did for me, I was very much astronaut focused, but it taught me about all the people on the ground that support our astronauts so that they can be successful in space. And I never thought about NASA from that perspective because what you see on TV and in the movies mainly focuses on the astronauts. So that was my first introduction into being a flight controller. And then look at what I do now. I'm really a flight controller.
Yeah. That's so awesome. Now, I did want to actually touch, though, you mentioned you got your master's here at UAH. Would you recommend other young women who were looking and following in your steps for them also to get their master's?
I definitely, if you're if your heart is in it, I will say, I definitely recommend getting an advanced degree, especially in the science fields. During my 4 years of undergraduate education, every summer I did an internship. So in the chemistry field, I got to experience what different jobs are like that I could get with a bachelor's in chemistry. And I did all the jobs well, and um, I enjoyed the jobs, but I learned that's not what I want to do for the rest of my life.
Hmm.
And that's okay. Sometimes the best thing you can learn is what you don't want to do versus what you do want to do. You don't always get lucky and find the thing you do want to do at your first try. You've got to do a little exploring. But going on to earn my master's opened some more doors, especially here in Huntsville, because while I was in school, I had a grant from NASA. So I got to do some of my graduate research actually at Marshall. So I was not only getting experience in the field, but I was meeting people. And, the old saying, it's not what you know, it's who you know. I actually think it's both. It's what you know and who you know. Because once you meet people and you learn what they're doing, you have an opportunity to say, hey, that really interests me. Down the road, maybe I can come back and work with you or learn a little bit more about that. And you have those contacts. So after you graduate, you're not just applying for jobs blindly. You can call up that person you used to work with and say, hey, remember when we worked on this project a few years ago? Is anything still going on in that area? I'm really interested and would like to maybe get a job with you doing that particular thing.
Absolutely. I could not agree more. And really that's the heart behind Grace's Girls Club is especially I feel like in North Alabama, which not saying anything negative against you, but you either work for NASA or you work for missile defense. But kind of to your
Mhm.
point earlier, you didn't realize how many jobs there were to support astronauts. And that's kind of the point of Grace's Girls Club is expanding horizons. This is what STEM is. This is all the different ways that can look. See if any of these interest you.
And that's perfect. That's why I'm so thankful that you asked me to be a part of this because one of my passions is continuing to educate and empower the next generation to follow their dreams, no matter what they are, even if they aren't in STEM specifically.
Mhm.
Follow your dream because no matter what decisions you make along the way, um, as long as you're following your heart, you will never um, you'll never be upset at where you end up.
Yeah.
As my goal was to be an astronaut. And so every decision I made was with the thought of what do I need to do to improve my chances of being an astronaut. Obviously, I did not make it. And that was a disappointment for me, but now I get to work with astronauts every day. So it's like the next best thing to being there. So I can honestly say that I love my job. I love going to work, and I do not regret any decision I made along the way that got me to where I am.
Oh, that's such a healthy perspective. That's so awesome. So we've kind of been tiptoeing around it. You may feel like you've already answered this, but what was the one thing that made you really choose your field? We kind of talked about some of the science, some of the space camp that was the exposure that you got. Do you feel like you've already answered that question, or is there something else that you can pinpoint?
Um, I actually, well, when we say my field, my current field as a flight controller has been the best job I've ever had, and I've loved it, and I hope I get to do it until I retire. I will say this was not my first job at NASA. I had several other jobs along the way, and each one I gained experience, I learned something a little different, but because of the way things are, I had to change paths several times in my NASA career. And at the time, it's scary and it's frustrating because you've been working on something for so long and then all of a sudden it goes away and you have to find something new to do. So I went through that 3 or 4 times actually while I've been working here. But after the last one, when I had to find, okay, what's next? That's when I learned about the Payload Operations Center here at Marshall. And that's when I moved down and started supporting the International Space Station and human exploration. And I wouldn't have gotten that opportunity had the other things I worked on if they had not ended, because I would still be working on those previous projects. So just because something ends doesn't mean that it, as they say, when one door closes, another door opens. I'm walking proof of that, and it took about 3 or 4 doors to close before I found the right door to open, and I am in my happy place.
Oh, absolutely. Girl, you could be a TED Talk motivational speaker. I tell you what. I'm like taking notes back here on like sticky notes I'm going to post all around the house. So I do want to be real with the girls though. That's a big part of Grace's Girls Club is give them a true picture. Walk me through what maybe the most challenging part of your job is.
Um, instead of focusing on the job, can I focus on the journey? I would like to say that along my path, even while I was still in school, before I was working for NASA, I had many roadblocks put in my path. And I had many opportunities where I could have said, this is too hard. I'm not doing this anymore. Um, I got very frustrated. Even today, I have been in situations where I was not allowed to do things simply because I'm a girl.
Hmm.
And uh, luckily, or maybe not so luckily for the people who know me, I'm very stubborn. I don't give up easy. I'm very competitive. So every time one of those roadblocks got in my way, I tried to figure out a way around it. And sometimes I had to invent new ways. You know, sometimes you go over roadblocks, sometimes you go around them, sometimes you go through them, sometimes you go under them, but you find a way around the roadblock. And it's not always easy, but never give up.
Hmm.
And I will say one of the key points in my journey that led me to where I am today is when I was a grad student at UAH, I was actually pursuing a PhD. I had earned my master's and I was continuing my education to earn a PhD. I wanted to be Dr. Penny. And I had one of those roadblocks. And one of those roadblocks continued to be in my path. And I got to a decision point. Do I continue fighting this roadblock, or do I get on with my life and try to pursue my dreams?
Right.
And it's difficult when you've been pursuing a dream for a long time to admit defeat.
Right.
But I did what was best for me, not only mentally, but for my health. And even though it was difficult at the time, I've never regretted that decision. Because again, had I not made that decision, started working at NASA, I would not be where I am today. So sometimes you hit those opportunities that are difficult, and you have to make the hard decision. And it and no matter how hard it is in the moment, it'll pay off down the road. You've always got to look out for you. Nobody else is going to look out for you more than you do. Do what you know is right in your heart, and it'll pay off in the end.
Yeah, absolutely. And you touched on something that I'm learning is true in my own life. Sometimes the dream changes. And sometimes you live
Right.
the dream for a long time or a short period of time or whatever that might be. And that doesn't mean you've failed or you've given up. But sometimes as you learn and as you grow, the dream changes from the dream you had when you were 15. Now, very quickly, I know you're very busy, but last question for you. And again, you may feel like you've already answered this. If you have, let me know. But do you have a message to young girls or young students in general that want to work in the STEM workforce one day? What is your message of encouragement to them?
My message is follow your heart, follow your passion, whatever you're passionate about, um, follow it. Because if you become the best at whatever you do, you will find a path within the area that you're interested in. For example, with NASA, everybody thinks STEM, but there are also a lot of jobs at NASA that maybe aren't exactly related to STEM. NASA has writers, NASA has photographers, NASA has culinary artists because people have to make the food that the astronauts eat on board. So no matter what your passion is, be the best at it that you can be, and then find a way to get that passion into the world you're interested in, like at NASA. Everybody thinks STEM, and that's great. And a lot of what we do is STEM, but there's a lot of other opportunities as well. And there's no reason that the two can't mesh. You could be a food scientist, have the science part, but also be developing healthier and tastier food that the astronauts would eat on the space station. So just follow your passion and your heart will never lead you wrong.
And there you have it. Well, NASA's Paycomm Penny, thank you so much for joining us on Grace's Girls Club today. Welcome officially. I really appreciate your time and you sharing your expertise with us.
Thank you very much for having me.
Have a great day.
Thanks. Bye-bye.